Good morning from Beside the Tracks. Luke chapter 18, 9 through 14. I even titled this, I'm Glad I'm Not Like That. Also, Jesus spoke this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and despised others. Two men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, the other was a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and prayed thus with himself, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as the tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I possess. And the tax collector, standing afar off, would not so much as raise his eyes to heaven. He beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other, because the one who exalts himself will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be exalted. It's easy to look at that self-righteous Pharisee and miss an important fact. First, the humility of the tax collector. We'll look at that. He recognized his state before God. Tax collectors, as you know, were despised by their countrymen as traitors. This man was awakened to his plight and began to see his sin. He could look at his folly, first of all, as all sin is against God, first and foremost. Remember in 1 John 1:9, John said, if we confess our sins, he's faithful and just to forgive us our sins and cleanse us from all unrighteousness. The term confess here translates the Greek term homologeo, to say the same thing. In other words, the previous verse says, if you don't think you have sinned, you're in deep trouble. You're a liar. But if we say the same thing as God, if we agree that we have sinned against God and say, Lord, be merciful to me, a sinner, we're granted forgiveness. Many people deny that they're sinners. We've established in this country, especially, a self-worship where I am the one who determines what's right and wrong in my life. Someone said, only God can judge me. I say, yep, sadly enough, he will one day. The tax collector got the memo. He saw his sin before God. God, by his Spirit, enlightened him to that truth. Much like the thief who hung beside Jesus on the cross, his eyes were open, and he heard the truth and prayed that the Lord would remember him when he came into his kingdom. That thief died, but that very day was in paradise with Jesus. Alistair Begg shares what it must have been like for him. He says, the angel in charge says, what are you doing here? And the guy says, I'm not sure. The angel says, have you been faithful to God's law? He said, no, not at all. Not at all. Are you clear on the doctrine of justification by faith? He said, what's that? The angel calls the supervisors. Well, have you been baptized? No, I haven't. Well, what are you doing here? And the thief gave the answer that all of us must give. The man on the middle cross said, I could come. His humility and faith, he recognized Jesus as Lord and got him an entrance to paradise. The other fellow, he was not as blessed and went from one torment to a worse one. As we see the tax collector crying for mercy, at the same time we see a rather upright-looking religious man looking down his nose at that awful, wretched sinner and praying to a holy God, mind you. God, I thank you that I'm not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even as this tax collector. I fast twice a week, he said, and I give tithes of everything I possess. The tax collector and the thief of the cross all had come to a humble place of understanding. As verse 14 says, he prayed, God be merciful to me, a sinner. This man went justified rather than the other. You know where Jesus instructed us to look at the log in our own eye before removing the speck from our brothers? I'm thinking, that Pharisee should have done that. And I was looking at that Pharisee and thinking, I don't want to be like him. And then for a minute, I said what he said about the tax collector. And suddenly, I became him. May God grant us the humility to see ourselves in light of his holiness and accept the mercy that he so freely offers. That's my view from Beside the Tracks.